He was a teenage emperor who married a virgin priestess, tried to replace Rome's gods with his own, and threw dinner parties that ended with live snakes crawling under the tables. His name was Elagabalus, and his reign nearly tore apart the empire that ruled the known world. To some, he was a madman, decadent, perverse, and cruel. To others, he was a misunderstood visionary who tried to bring something divine, something new, into a civilization already cracking under its own weight. This is not a story of conquest or empire. It's the story of a boy who believed he was chosen by the gods, and of the empire that destroyed him for it. By the year 217 CE, Rome was exhausted. 2 centuries of empire had brought wealth beyond imagination, but also paranoia, corruption, and blood. Emperors no longer died of old age. They were stabbed, poisoned, strangled, or erased. The most recent ruler, Caracalla, had built his reign on brutality. He massacred thousands, taxed the provinces to ruin, and fought endless wars. But soldiers loved him, he paid them well, and promised them glory. When Caracalla was assassinated on campaign in Syria, the army was left adrift. His successor, Macrinus, was a bureaucrat, not a warrior. He cut military pay, ended the campaigns, and angered the legions that guarded Rome's eastern frontiers. In that fragile moment, the fate of the empire rested on rumor, ambition, and one extraordinary family. Far from Rome, in the wealthy Syrian city of Emesa, lived the powerful Severan women, a dynasty of cunning, politically ruthless matriarchs. Among them was Julia Maesa, sister of the late Empress Julia Domna and aunt to Caracalla himself. Maesa had been forced into exile after Caracalla's death. She watched as her family's influence vanished, and Macrinus tightened his control. But she had something Macrinus did not: the loyalty of the Eastern legions, and a grandson who could become their symbol. That grandson was Varius Avitus Bassianus, a boy of just 14. He served as the high priest of the sun god Elagabalus, a deity worshipped in the form of a black meteorite, said to have fallen from the heavens. When Bassianus appeared before crowds, draped in silk robes, shining gold jewelry, the rays of the Syrian sun behind him, people whispered that he looked divine. Julia Maesa saw her chance. She spread a dangerous lie that the boy was Caracalla's secret son, born of a hidden union. To the soldiers still loyal to their murdered emperor, this meant something sacred. Caracalla's blood had returned to reclaim Rome, and so they revolted. The rebellion erupted like wildfire. The Eastern legions declared Bassianus emperor and took up arms against Macrinus. Macrinus tried to suppress it, but the soldiers deserted him. He fled, was caught, and executed. In June of 218 CE, the boy priest was proclaimed Emperor of Rome. He adopted the name Marcus Aurelius Antoninus, but the world would remember him only by his god, Elagabalus. He was 14 years old, and already he was convinced he was divine. When he marched into Antioch, people lined the streets to see him, a child draped in gold, surrounded by banners of the rising sun. He distributed riches, promised games and food, and declared that Rome would soon be reborn under the eye of Elagabalus, the sun that sees all. It was a coronation of light, but behind that light, something darker stirred. Rome was about to meet its strangest ruler. When Elagabalus arrived in Rome the following year, the city turned out in force. It had seen boy emperors before, but never one like this. He entered the capital not as a general, nor a statesman, but as a priest. Before him marched the sacred black meteorite of Emesa, carried on a golden chariot drawn by white horses. Behind it followed drums, incense, and the chanting of Syrian priests. Rome, proud, ancient, traditional, watched in awe and disbelief. Almost immediately, the new emperor began reshaping everything. He built a vast temple on the Palatine Hill, called the Elagabalus, dedicated to his sun god. There, the meteorite was enshrined, and the emperor himself performed daily rituals, dressed in silken robes, dancing before the altar to the rhythm of flutes and drums. To Elagabalus, He wasn't just worshiping a god, he was the god, the living embodiment of the sun. He declared that all Roman gods were now subordinate to Elagabalus. Even Jupiter, king of Olympus, was to take second place. He ordered that Rome's most sacred relics, including the eternal flame of Vesta and the shields of Mars, be moved to his temple. To the Romans, this was not devotion, it was blasphemy. Then came the act that sent shockwaves through the empire. Elagabalus announced his marriage to Julia Severa, one of the Vestal Virgins, priestesses sworn to 30 years of celibacy under penalty of death. The ceremony was magnificent, gold music and offerings to the sun. Elagabalus claimed it was a divine union, the marriage of the sun god and the eternal flame, meant to bring heavenly balance to Rome. But for ordinary Romans, it was unthinkable. The Vestals were sacred, their chastity bound to the city's safety. If one broke her vow, it was believed that Rome itself might fall. The Senate protested, the people whispered, but Elagabalus was unmoved. In his mind, he was beyond mortal laws, above tradition, above morality, above Rome itself. As his power grew, so did his indulgence. The imperial palace became a place of rumor and fascination. Elagabalus filled it with entertainers, dancers, foreign priests, and exotic animals. He held banquets of stunning extravagance, rooms decorated in gold leaf, dishes made from the tongues of flamingos and peacocks, fountains that poured wine instead of water. Guests were showered with petals and perfumes from the ceiling. Sometimes historians claim so heavily that people suffocated beneath the flowers. He was known to switch between male and female clothing, painting his eyes, calling himself lady or empress. He reportedly sought surgeons who could make him into a woman, offering gold to any physician who could grant him the transformation. Whether these stories are exaggerations or not, they reflect something deeper. The Romans saw him as a ruler who broke every boundary of their world: gender, religion, and power. And yet, he was still a teenager, impulsive, adored, and utterly unrestrained. But the empire he ruled was not amused. The Praetorian Guard, the elite soldiers sworn to protect the emperor, began to seethe. They despised his Syrian advisors, his foreign rituals, his public humiliation of their officers. The Senate mocked him in private. The people grumbled that the gods would punish Rome for his blasphemy. Behind him, his grandmother Julia Maesa began to plot. She had created Elagabalus's power, now she would save herself from it. In 221 CE, she forced him to adopt his younger cousin Alexander Severus as co-emperor. Alexander was everything Elagabalus was not: disciplined, Roman, obedient. The soldiers adored him instantly. Elagabalus hated him. He saw in Alexander not a successor, but a rival, and plotted to have him killed. When the guard heard the rumor, their loyalty shattered completely. The boy god had made too many enemies, and even the divine sun could not protect him now. It happened suddenly, almost quietly. On March 11, 222 CE, the Praetorian Guard surrounded the imperial palace. Elagabalus and his mother fled into the Temple of the Sun, hiding behind the altar that had once made him a god. But the soldiers stormed inside. There was no mercy. The emperor, who had declared himself divine, was dragged from his sanctuary and struck down. His mother was killed beside him. Elagabalus was 18 years old. His body was desecrated, dragged through the streets, and thrown into the Tiber River, a final rejection, washing away the stain of his blasphemy. After his death, his cousin Alexander Severus was proclaimed emperor. The temples of the sun were destroyed, the black stones sent back to Syria, and the name of Elagabalus erased from inscriptions, a process the Romans called damnatio memoriae, the condemnation of memory. Officially, he never existed. But history has a strange way of preserving what it tries to destroy. Centuries later, his story survived, painted by his enemies as a tale of madness, depravity, and divine arrogance. Yet, beneath those layers of scandal, another portrait emerges, a lonely child emperor, shaped by the ambitions of others, thrust into absolute power before he even understood the world. Elagabalus challenged Rome not through conquest or cruelty, but through identity, by daring to live and rule as something entirely alien to what Rome believed an emperor should be. He was adored, feared, hated, and finally erased. And still, 2,000 years later, we speak his name. Was he a monster, a martyr, a misunderstood god? No one can say for certain. But for 4 short years, he made the greatest empire on earth tremble, not with armies, but with audacity. He was Elagabalus, the boy who tried to outshine the gods.